Okay. When it comes to your fully decked out selector, you're going to want to pick units that are not only kind of must-have units, but are also really, really, really Mola intensive. The units that you're going to want to have at least 18 to 20 Molagora invested in, right? At least like plus 12 or better, because you want to get the maximum benefit. You don't want to use your decked out selector on a unit that only takes 3 or 4 Molagora. Just use a regular selector for that. Even if that's a better unit, use a regular selector on that, spend 3 to 4 Mola on it and be done, and then use your decked out selector on one of these units to get the maximum return on investment on Molagora. 30 Molagora is damn near a month's worth of waiting in this game. So go ahead and pick units from this list that you can get good benefit out of the Mola. So let's go over it. First is our must-have units. I think everybody in this top row is a unit that they should have on their account, right? Fire Ravi is a strong bruiser DPS unit, will carry you early game, and is a plus 15 unit for sure. One of the best pickups for a selector ticket. Even if you've already got her and she's only got 2 or 3 Mola in it, you can pick her up at plus 15 and then imprint her with that singular one. Though I do recommend you get every unit in the game before you start worrying about just trying to get the Mola benefit out of the unit imprinting. But there are situations where you may want to do that. Everybody's got to find their own path. If you've got every unit in the game, that is certainly the way you approach it, is you look at what units take the most Mola that you could possibly use and you pick those units up. Roana is a plus 14 unit. She surprisingly needs a metric ton of Molagora, and she's incredibly important. Definitely worthy to pick up. Fire Politis, though, if you run her in her supportive mode, where she is just about sticking debuffs, she doesn't really need that much Mola, but she is a very strong damage dealer, so I think it's worthy to get her as a plus 15 unit, especially if you have a second one. You can build one as support and one as damage. She is an evergreen unit who's always going to be a thorn in your enemy's side, worth picking up. Celine is one of the strongest RGB damage dealers in the game, worth picking up for her, and she needs Mola in every single skill. Her S2 and S3 especially, and then when her S1 goes off, you want that to hit like a truck too. So any unit that's strong and meta and takes plus 15 goes to the top of my list. Choux, although she's fallen off a bit in PvP, she's starting to find places in PvE as well. She is 100% a plus 15 unit. She's really, really good early game in PvP, and in late game, she's really good in PvE. So a very good pickup. Destina takes a ton of Molagora, all of her skills. Her S2 and her S3 need to be maxed, and her S1 you probably want maxed too, because all of her healing is hidden inside of her skill ups. So the more Mola you have in her, the better she is, and she is a safety net unit that will help you accomplish so much in PvE and in Guild Wars. Now we move down to our solid use units. We got some RTA units in here like Ran. A lot of people say Ran doesn't need Molagora. Ran is fine at, he just needs his S3 Mola for effect. That you don't need the S2 cooldown because he's not going to take another turn. I think those people are crazy. Ran does so much damage, and leaving that damage on the table for a unit that you're going to use so often in PvP is crazy. His S3 hits like a truck. His S1 has penetration. He can put up defense break, and then he can use his S1 and absolutely crush enemies. I think this is a very, very good unit to have at plus 15. Aria is difficult to build at end game and easy to build at early game, and the one consistent thing about her is she needs all of her skills maxed out. So plus 15 unit who's good all over the place in this game, from soloing Abyss on auto to being the easiest Wyvern 13 one-shot build out there, to being pretty good in RTA and stellar in late game Guild Wars. Nahkwol is kind of on the same boat as Ran. Though she doesn't do as much damage, having her skills maxed out will help you pick her a lot more often and make her more viable when you stick your toe into RTA. Because she is the most broken RGB PvP unit we've got in the game, I think she's worth picking up, and with how often you'll use her, there's nothing wrong with having her at plus 15 either. Alencia, after her buffs, is finding more and more of a place in the game. She's easily the best, well, let's change that, easily the strongest injury spamming unit in the game. If you want to bring injury onto the game, you bring Alencia, you pair her with ML Rat, and you're going to destroy people. Urban Shadow Choux and Alencia are besties. Iseria, though she doesn't need Max Mola, you're going to use her in so much PvE that even the extra damage she spits out there is useful. So I think picking this girl up at plus 15, just because of her ability, her unique ability to enable so many units, worth getting. Bellona, you'll use her less and less the further you go in the game, but the earlier you are in the game, the more important she is, and then content always pops up that seems to need her. Remember when Rift first came out and everybody was upset that they had fed their Bellonas into Lone Crescent Bellona? Yeah, every once in a while something pops up that makes Bellona critical to this game, and if you're early game, she is Queen of the Abyss and will help you with so much early content, and all of her skills need maxed out, so a worthy pickup. Zahack, a little bit more niche, but it's a strong niche. Zahack lets you punch through evasion, and that is incredible. So I think Zahack is a great pickup, especially with the number of people out there running units like Savior Auden. Zahack is one of the reasons for the meteoric fall of units like Violet and Remnant Violet. So definitely a solid counter pick to pick up. Also a strong damage deal in his own right, and is usable inside of a Nightmare Raid as well. Ida is just a good solid meat and potatoes damage dealing unit, right? You want to be able to drop some damage with an ice unit. Ida is your girl. She's got an AoE S2 that pushes the enemy back. She's got an AoE S3 that stuns. She's got a significant amount of damage. She can carry book. She can soul burn her S2, go right into her S3, which means she can do double AoE attacks on her turns, and non-attack skills CR push her up. So she is easy to build on mediocre speed and just let one of your openers who's got a non-attack skill push her up. Great in Guild Wars, pretty okay in early arena, and even as a DPS in some PvE levels where water units are needed, a good pickup. Fumyr is a technical unit. She's tricky to use, but if you want to use her, you want her to be plus 15. You need to pair her with all three elements, and when you do that, she can put the entire enemy team to sleep. And when the entire enemy team's asleep, you can run over them with the rest of your units, and then she can just nuclear eliminate one of the units. I think Fumyr is one of the more underrated DPS units in the game. I think people steer clear from her because they're intimidated by how unusual and technical her kit is. Luluca is a unit that went from niche use to solid use practically overnight with Hall of Trials popping up. She's been used in just about every Hall of Trials that's come out, every Advent event that's come out. She is a jack of all trades, period. I'm not going to say master of none. There is a lot of times when you won't reach for Luluca because you've got a better solution, but Luluca is a solution for so many aspects of the game. I think she is a unit that people are just starting to realize they really need on their team, and having her at plus 15 is really nice. Now, there is something to be said about just using a regular selector on Luluca. There is a weird interaction with her S2 skill, where in some situations you're going to when you're running her on full auto, you're not going to want to have her S2 skilled up because the AI will rotate her S2 instead of using her S3, and it lets you do a little bit less damage on auto. That's a very, very niche interaction, but if you're worried about that, then maybe don't pick her with your fully decked out selector, just get her with a regular one and just mola her S1 and S3. Mine's plus 15 and I don't feel bad for it. Now we'll drop down to the niche use. These are good solid use units that again want like 12 mola or more. Abigail is a great unit, especially at early game, for helping keep a unit on the field that you want to keep on the field. Abigail works really, really well with those poor people out there who got a Twisted Idol on Kayron from their ML5 ticket. Sorry, guys. With a recent buff, she always is able to stick her buff block and her vampirism on the back row unit, so finding more and more uses in a modern game. Vildred's niche use is he is the only unit in the game that gives plus 12 speed to all 4 spots on the board. Makes him the strongest speed imprint in the game. by giving 36 speed to everybody. Now, there are a couple of units they give plus 14 speed, but they only do it to 2, so it's only a 28 speed boost for your team versus a 36 speed boost for your team. And Vildred is one of those units that you should always be picking up when you can to work towards getting speed boost, and when he takes a turn, he does nuclear damage. His S2 and his S3 you want maxed out. His S1 is no slouch either. He's good in PvE. He's great at killing the A13 hunt. He's good for just farming normal adventure. Really good unit to have and pick up, but you're probably not going to reach for him on a daily basis, so I moved him down here to niche use. Peyra is such a strong unit that you will use her a lot. She's not super heavy Mola requirement, but her usage is so high that having her Mola all the way out is not bad. Getting boosts for her chance to stun. And she's got a really solid kit. She doesn't do the damage of Ran, which is the only reason she's down a tier from Ran. Beehoo is a unit who, though he doesn't need all of the Mola, having most of the Mola is really good. This, like Fumyr, is a very underrated unit for controlling and killing teams. He is insanely good against units that have damage limit to them, like Lilias. I think he's a worthwhile pickup. Fire Aramintha is more of a late game unit. She's a little harder to use. She takes pretty good gear, but she also takes plus 15 Mola. So if you plan to use Fire Aramintha in a competitive way, you're going to want to pick her up with a fully decked out selector so you can get plus 15 Molagora on her. Charlotte is another unit who is a little bit harder to use, but she is a bruisery knight unit. She is one of the few fire bruisers who is still relatively effective. She's easier to build now that she doesn't require any crit chance. She always crits, which makes her insane into units like Landy and DN who spam anti-crit. She is, being a knight, you can build her bulky as well with damage. Good solid bruiser unit. Not as heavily used later game, but early game I think she's a very viable pick, both in PvE and early PvP. I think she's worth picking up, especially as a plus 15 unit. Flan doesn't really need as much Mola, but her usefulness is very, very good. I think you'll still want to put at least 12 to 15 Molagora in her to get all of her skill cooldown. So if you plan to use Flan to help push your BBKs around, to help initiate your Ludwigs, to use in Arena, and even if you want to try to take her into RTA, she'll be really good in early RTA. Great in Guild Wars, solid pickup for people who want to get into the fast side of the game. Violet is a green bruiser. He has built-in evasion, built-in self-healing. He attacks the enemy when they miss him, and since he has evasion, they miss him a lot. He can solo teams. If your opponent doesn't pick an answer to Violet, Violet's just going to win the game by existing. So he is a really nice unit to take into early RTA. He's one of those units that you slam when you can't think of who to pick on that last spot. I think a lot of people have walked away from Violet because when you get into the later game, when you get into the high-end parts of PvP, there are so many answers to Violet that he doesn't really have a place. But when you're in the early game where there's not a ton of answers to Violet, he's got a very strong place, and he's a worthwhile pickup for people who are just starting to dip their toes into PvP. Fire Lilias is really, really good in PvE. She's a dual attack unit, and you need as many of those as you can get. Now, her dual attack is random, but that's okay, because her kit also comes with a AoE cleanse, and her S3 does damage based on the highest attack on your team. So you pair her with a high attack unit, and suddenly her attack and damage is insane. She's also an HP scaler on her S1. She has got the ability to wear knight artifacts. You can build her tanky to help support the team and be a cleanser. You can build her high-end DPS. You can do a little bit of both. You'll find lots of uses from her, from killing Secretary Vera in Nightmare Raid to a lot of relatively difficult levels in Abyss to even some early PvP usages. Senya is probably the easiest way to get into RTA. At an early level, she's very hard for people to deal with. You've just got to make sure you ban or avoid picking her into units that always crit, like Lone Crescent Bellona or Charlotte, or you get what I'm saying, right? Her big gimmick is she has got anti-crit baked into her kit, and when people miss crit on her, they take damage passively. Makes her a really strong unit to have on your team. Yeah, don't take her into Ravi either. Mort is a green bruiser. Similar to Charlotte and Senya, he is just a really good solid unit that needs plus 15. I think he's got more potential at later game, but the further you progress in the game, the better gear the Great Mortellix is going to take from you. I think Mort is tremendously underrated. The amount of support he brings to the team, as well as the damage he brings to the team, combined with the fact that he's loaded with defense breaks, makes Mort a powerhouse to have on your team. Just be careful about picking him into fire units or units that counter him. Speaking of fire units, we have Fire Kayron. Fire Kayron is you don't like getting cleaved, you're tired of getting cleaved. Fire Kayron could be an answer to that. Now, he's fallen off quite a bit with units like New Moon Luna, but if you're careful about your pre-bans and your post-bans, Fire Kayron can be a last pick that wins fights for you. He can be a solid pickup in Arena. He does take all of the Mola to really be an effective unit in this game, so that's why he's kind of on the lower end of the niche list, but still an okay pickup. Elena should be like up here, except that she only takes like 10 or 11 Molagora, 12 tops to make useful. Picking her up as a plus 15 could be seen as a waste of Mola, but she's such an important unit to the game, I could not put her on the list. So she's not so much niche use as she is kind of a low Mola need, high use unit. Haste is, the further you get in the game, the less you're going to use Haste. Haste was one of the most important units to have when Fire Rift was out, but since Fire Rift is gone, his usage has dropped quite a bit. But I want you to remember that Haste has self-sustain, defense breaks, built-in heal, the ability to heal the entire team with his S2, strong AoE and single target attacks, more defense breaks, and he's a thief, and he does really good damage. He is one of the better PvE units. He's kind of like a fire version of Luluca in the sense that when you need him big time, but it's kind of rare that you need him. When situations arise where haste is needed, you'll be glad you have him, and he is a plus 15 unit. So if you don't have anything else on this list, go ahead and pick yourself up a haste. You probably won't reach for him very often, but he's a good one to have in your back pocket. Same story with Tenebria. When you're climbing through Abyss, there's certain levels Tenebria is meta on, and having her at plus 15 is great. Now, these are the kind of units that Grace of Growth lives for, right? But you probably have your Grace of Growth on Wukong. You probably have your Grace of Growth on that brand new unit pick. So I hate saying, well, just Grace of Growth a unit when, well, maybe you've Grace to Growth your Destina and you don't have one to spare. Grace of Growth should be for units you've already pulled, not for using a standard selector and immediately putting that unit on Grace. It basically locks down your Grace of Growth. So if you've got a selector, these are decent ones. Now, I want to talk real quick about these free units. If you've got every unit on this list we've talked about so far, there is a world where you can select a free unit, because almost all of these free units would like to have plus 14 or plus 15 Molagora. And that's a lot of Molagora, right? That's 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, 180 Molagora. Do you have 180 Molagora? I don't have 180 Molagora. So there are some people out there that are saying, use a selector on Tamarin, and then just imprint Tamarin. Use a selector on Brieg, and then just imprint Brieg to save the Molagora. If you want to do that, you do you. That's a great way to be very conscious about Molagora, a resource that is very, very, very hard to get. Is gated at the rate of about, you can do one unit every month with free-to-play Molagora. But I can't endorse spending a selector ticket on a unit that you're getting for free if you're missing other units. I think if there's any other unit you don't have that needs Molagora, you kind of go for that before you just level up one of these. So really, really consider it, because none of these units need it. They're better with it. You'll be able to cleave through things faster with it. You'll be stronger with it, but you don't need it. You'll be less efficient until you get it. You might struggle to kill until it happens, but it will eventually happen. You will get free Molagora every single week. Every single month you'll be able to do one of these units. So don't waste something as valuable as a selector ticket just chasing a month's savings worth of Molagora, unless you've got all of the units in the game. That's when you play that game. So I strongly recommend against using your selector on any of these units, because all you're doing is advancing your account about a month in the sense that you can apply that Molagora in other places. Be very, very sure that that's the right move for you, and that the right move isn't picking up an important unit that you're going to be sad that you don't have later, and complain that you can't do this event because you don't have this unit, and you're constantly going to be spamming people, what's a replacement for Luluca, and they're going to tell you there isn't one, and you're going to sit there and go, well, I sure am glad I got that plus 15 Brieg. So yeah, consider that. And these bottom units down here, if you want to pick up one of these units because you're a collector, because you love the units, because all of these units are already in your pocket, then grab one of them. For the love of God, pick up your Elvira and stare at those legs. Pick up your Ludwig and go cleave Arena for the next couple of days. Pick up Cecilia and have a decent debuffing Fire Bruiser. Pick up Ken and Murder Wyvern. Pick up Arunca and go, damn, that looks nice. Whatever you want to do, go for it. Don't let anybody talk you out of it. All the units in the game have some use somewhere, with a couple of exceptions. Pick up the units you want to pick up. So that's my tier list, and that's my recommendation for the decked out selector. If you want to see my recommendation for the normal selectors, I'll have a link in the description of the video to that tier list, as well as a link in the description of the video for my tier list for artifacts. If you have any questions, ask them in the comments section. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and you guys have a great rest of your week. Take care, Epic 7.